All right, episode, I believe it's 59 of the Fired Coaches podcast. We have a really special guest, and myself, growing up in the Wisconsin area, being a high school basketball player, getting the opportunity to play Division III basketball. And obviously, if you're familiar with the state of Wisconsin and the state system and the WIAC or WEAC, depending on who you are and how you pronounce it, obviously the toughest league in the state, we have a really special guest in Coach Eddie Andrus, who spent a lot of time at Stout as a student assistant, assistant coach, head coach, longtime head coach in Mount Senario with a ton of success, high school coach. I mean, you want to talk about a guy whose name is very familiar in the Wisconsin basketball scene. Coach Andrist, now down in the Arizona area. Appreciate you joining and taking some time to kind of share your stories and your experience as a head basketball coach here tonight.
Marcus, I appreciate you really having me. I look forward to going over some old times.
Yeah, for sure. I guess digging in, going way back in the day, what led you to attend and Stout? I believe it was back in 72. What led you to go into Stout? And then what led you to really wanting to get involved with the men's basketball program?
Well, the I had taken some industrial arts classes at Wasaki High School, and that's what UW-Stout is famous for is their industrial arts, technology arts program. And so academically, that's what I went for. And then the great Dewey Mintz was the head coach there and had won 4 or 5 titles, USUC titles, because that's what it was back then. And so, and I went out for the basketball team. And a funny story is I walk in the gym for tryouts and there were 90 guys on the floor. I'm not kidding you. There were 90 guys. And good, I'm telling you, back in 72, there were a lot of really good athletes that were playing at that level.
And that was NAIA,
And
NAIA, correct?
NAI, correct. And so I made, they were making cuts 10 at a time. I probably made it to about the eighth cut, and then I knew I wasn't going to make it, but it crushed me not to be able to continue my basketball career. So after tryouts were over, I went into Coach Mintz's office and asked him if I could be part of the program, and he said, "Absolutely, we can always use the help." And that is where I got going.
So I guess touch a little bit more on that landscape because I think again, if people that will listen to this, that and there's a lot of people, Wisconsin wise, specifically basketball, that will listen to this, and you hear the stories of, the UWO Claires and the Anderson days, and just all the different types of stories of NEIA basketball in the state and Stevens Point, and we can go on and on and on. You know, what was that like? I mean, how many of those guys were actually recruited? I mean, that you're talking about 90 guys coming to tryouts. How many of those guys were actually recruited, and what were even some of those, intramural leagues like and everything? I mean, just the talent on campus there had to be kind of crazy.
Well, I tell everybody the those teams back then, all those players, or at least 90% of those players, are all scholarship guys now. I mean, they were the real deal. If the teams that and this is no criticism of the WIAC now, but if the teams that are in the WIAC now, if they played those teams back then, they get beat by 40.
Really?
Because I'll tell you right now, these guys were I mean, we had Eau Claire had guys Shady and Tom Peck and Ratliff, and Stout had Sam Sanders and Jimmy Rhett. I mean, every school in the WSUC were sending players to the ABA, and they had tryouts in the NBA. You don't see that anymore because once again, the players that are that good, they're not coming to the WIC. They're going to the scholarship programs.
Yeah, what were those game environments like? I mean, you compare it to, right nowadays, especially, WIAC still gets pretty decent crowds, especially if you're winning and tournament time comes around and they're always packed. But what were those games like?
Well, first of all, there were no female athletics at all, and so it was we were the only show in town. Football, then into basketball, and the WSUC were it was standing room only. These games were packed to the rafters, and the corners of the gyms were all filled with standing people, and so the environment was incredible, absolutely incredible. And you had some of the greatest coaches, Kenny Anderson at Eau Claire, and Dick Bennett at Stevens Point, and I can and Bo Ryan at Platteville. Come on. There's some you wanna talk about name dropping, there's some big ones for you.
Yeah, and then, a couple years later, you're there, I believe it was '74, you guys win the WSUC. What did you see? And again, like you said, sticking around, you get cut, you're like, "Hey, I wanna help out." What gave you perspective in just a few years, winning that league and seeing that as a young kid of like, "Wow, I mean, this is, like you said, highest level basketball as you really can get at that back in the day at that time." I mean, what kinda insight were you able to grab, from Coach Mintz?
Well, always watching coaches that are really good, you still have things that you look at that maybe you really like, and then you maybe look at things that you don't like, or you would do something different. But the bottom line of the bottom line is always loyalty. You're always looking for coaches and players that are loyal to the program. Loyalty was really big back then, and I know Coach Mintz really put a lot of emphasis on loyalty to the program and hard work. He had some crazy things that he used to do. Like one thing he would do is if it was a big game, which they all were, we're going to Oshkosh and there's snow on the ground and it's cold and you get about a half mile from the gym and he dropped the team off. And they had to run into they had to run into the school just trying to get them.
Like a medal, like, let's get going.
He was the master of the mental. He would have a towel fight before the game in the locker room or in the classroom. Yeah, he would do a lot of mental preparation for the guys, and there was always a lot of complaining about, "Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that?" But I'll tell you, a lot of it worked, and he was the master at it.
So he knew when to push those buttons, what pregame speech to do, whatever it was. He was absolutely the master at that.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand that it's not just about the X's and O's. Matter of fact, the X's and O's might be 3rd or 4th down the list. They're very important, but there's a lot more things in preparation, practice, and motivational techniques, who to play, who not to play, when to play, and that's all part of the equation.
Absolutely. So you get some high school experience after that time. You do a little work at Lafarge, at Stanley Boyd, Stockbridge, which actually we were just I was just sharing off air when I was at Marion working for Coach Boyle. And I believe the only time that we faced you when I was a player there, and then as a coach was in your last year and Coach Boyle's last year, and I'm pretty sure it was right before we came to your holiday tournament to kick off the season. And he was talking about again, I think it was one of your Mount Scenario teams, but it could have been your early Stout days coming to the Sabres gymnasium, which is very tiny if people have ever been there. And the whole Stockbridge town was there to support Coach Andrus from his days back in the day. And so you obviously left a memorable mark. And what do you remember from, those 3 stops and cutting your teeth at the high school level again at a young age?
Well, the thing is it's such a learning experience because you're gonna make a million mistakes. You're experimenting. I came right out of college and I wanted to be a head coach right away, so I took the Lafarge job. But again, I look back at all those jobs and I think of all the things that I would have done different, which we always know hindsight's 2020. But you learn from your mistakes. And I never beat up on myself in terms of I wish I'd have done this or wish I'd have done that, but I certainly picked up a lot of pointers along the way, watching other teams, watching college practices. Coach Boyle was one of the great coaches at Marion, and he did such a wonderful job there. And what a great guy! What a great guy he is.
Yeah, phenomenal dude. So you talked about being from the Wasaki area, going to Stout. Was there, as you're going to high school stuff, was there ever a thought where you're like, hey, I want to get back to Wasaki or get to even, the highest level of, high school basketball, which some would say you got to be at the biggest high school in the state of Wisconsin or something like that. Was there ever any goals? Because, after those years in the high school ranks, you go back to Stout as an assistant. uh, Or was there such a pull with, your alma mater and being a part of that WSUC championship early on that you're like, that was kind of the gravity was if I can get back to Stout, that would be a really cool thing.
I think the biggest thing for me was I wanted to coach college. I wanted to recruit and I enjoyed the college experience so much that I really wanted to get to college. It didn't have to be Stout, could have been Mount Senario, which it was. And I learned very early in my career, never say never. Actually, I was a student assistant at Stout. We played Mount Senario, and they had a pretty nice team, and we beat them by 40, but they had a nice team. We would just hit on all cylinders. And somebody asked me after the game if I'd ever coach at Mount Senario, and I said never. And of course, I was there 11 years, so I learned to never say never.
Never say never. So 89-90, your first year of Mount Senario. And again, this is, really excited to get you on because again, like I said, growing up, I always heard of Mount Senario, but never actually knew about it because by the time I was a college athlete, the college and the school was kind of on the, discontinuation process. But that 89-90 season, first year there, you have a 26-10 record. Kind of paint the picture of NAIA athletics in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, and what that all looked like. I mean, for those of us that maybe weren't as familiar, again, with the history of Mount Senario at that time, was the program in a good spot? Did you have to kind of build it in that first year? Like, where was that kind of at?
I think Mike Olson, who was the head coach prior to myself, and he went to Gustavus he after Mount Senario. I think what happened is that Mike did a really good job. And oftentimes I'll ask coaches when I'm running camps or clinics or coaching clinics, I'll ask coaches, I'll say, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you rather go to a program that's really successful and coach, or a program that's really building and it hasn't done very well and coach? And obviously you can put your own stamp on it. I guarantee you 99.99 coaches always say, build my own program and go to a program that's not winning. And I looked at all the coaches, I said, you are absolutely crazy. Absolutely. If you're worth your salt as a coach, you'd rather go to a program that's done really well because you don't have to build it. You can just advance it, by your own coaching. And that's what happened in Mount Senario is that Mike Olson had done an exceptional job. We had some good players back. I brought some good players in. And when we were 26-10, we in the national tournament we played Paul Quinn and in the semifinals. And Paul Quinn was a team out of Texas. And the score was tied in the second half, and they went on I believe it was a 20-0 run. That was the end of the game. I think we lost by 8 or 9, but we just could not stop the bleeding. And I had pretty much everybody back the next year, and that's when we went 40-10 and won the national championship. But the thing is I really enjoyed my time at Mount Snarrow because, again, all I had to do was advance it in my vision to see how the program could get better, and that's what we did.
Yeah, and you obviously did a phenomenal job. I mean, 91, 94, 96, titles, and each of those 3 years national titles. Recruiting to Ladysmith, Wisconsin, right? Like I'm from Antigo, a town of 8,000. Ladysmith probably a little bit smaller, but there's some similarities there. And I picture myself like, okay, if there was a 4-year college in my hometown, what was that? What was that like from a recruiting standpoint? And what was your footprint? I mean, I know when you got to Stout, you would have guys from the Milwaukee area, from Minnesota. You would have small school Wisconsin guys, maybe on the western side of the state. What was kind of that pull for you at Ladysmith? Like, were you getting just talent wherever it was, or were you kind of looking like specific areas?
We obviously couldn't do the traditional type of recruiting because A, we did not have a gym. We played at the high school. B, we were a really small college up in the middle of nowhere. But I knew once I got the kids to the campus and to our program, most of them would stay because they liked how we did things. And the biggest recruiting that I sold, the biggest recruiting tool that I used was our schedule. If you're playing 50 games, 40 games, 38 games, 50 games a year, there's a lot of kids who love to play basketball and they love the travel. We were all the 11 years I was there, we went over a quarter of a million miles on trips. And so that's what sold our program was our schedule. Jason Walters, who scored 1,400 1 year, he looked at our schedule. He had gone to he had visited a lot of schools. He was out of Hutchinson Community College, but he came in and a lot of schools had looked at him, a lot of D2s, full ride. But when he looked at our schedule, he really liked it because he knew we were going to play a lot of games and do a lot of traveling. So we got him, and again, he had over 2,000 points in 2 years.
That's
So
great
he
stuff.
was a hell of a player.
Yeah, no, that's a great selling point. I noticed in, looking at those records and the amount of games compared to, your 25 in a regular season now at the Division 3 level, and maybe some tournament games in there, if you succeed and whatnot. But yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you're almost playing borderline an NBA schedule in some ways, getting that many games in. So what was the support like from the Lady Smith community? I mean, did they embrace Mount Scenario and specifically athletics and things like that with what you guys were doing?
Well, they really loved our program. Obviously, success always breeds success. But academically, our kids went to class. We took a tutor on the road when we were gone. All our kids graduated. And so we had a situation where we were doing all the right things because I've always believed in that. And I'll tell you, the another thing that really propelled our program at Mount Senario was the fact that we brought in 11 players from Yugoslavia. We had one player from Greece. We had a player from St. Kitts. We had kids from South America. And so we had a pretty good international connection, and that kind of took us over the top in terms of making it so that we were a program that was tough on all levels.
The 91, 94, 96 titles. I mean, again, you're talking about that first year you're there in 89, 90, and falling short. But those title years, any memories or any things that stick out that really, and again, I don't want you to pick, favorite players and stuff like that, because I know it's like picking your own children and all that in terms of choosing stuff. But any moments or stories that you remember that really kind of stood out for you in any of those three title runs that you had there?
Well, the biggest thing that I've always said is that I tried to reduce the amount of pressure on our teams to win the national title. We always had that goal. But I remember the first one, the 1991 title, was the toughest one because we hadn't done it. And we're playing a team out of Michigan, out of Detroit, and we just can't get rid of them. I mean, they're so good, they're so athletic, and we're hanging on, and they bang a 3 at the horn, to send it into overtime. I almost passed out because, it's just like, what's it gonna take here? We hit a shot at the horn to win in overtime. And so that was the toughest one because once you've done it, whether the next team that wins it had guys from that team or not, which most of the time they didn't, you're in a situation where it's been done. And once it's been done, it becomes not easier, but more attainable. And the thing is that the kids, then your expectations are once you've done it, your expectations are is that's our goal every year. Not to win. Because if you look at some of our records in Mount Scenario, we had some losses, but we're playing South Dakota State, North Dakota State, UW Milwaukee. We're playing all the big dogs, as many as we can get on the road, and so therefore that just prepared us for the national championships at our level.
Yeah, so those guys weren't scared. That makes a ton of sense, and I can imagine too, when you're going for that title and a team sends a shot in OT that you just can't seem to get rid of, and like you said, right, if you haven't done it before, there's that, "Can we do it?" Right? There's that belief factor where at least if you've done it, it's like, "Okay, the standard's been set. We've been here. We've checked this off the list. We're gonna do it again." So that makes complete sense. Your last season there is 99, 2000. In 2000, 2001, you returned to Stout. Did you see things at Mount Scenario with the school in terms of like talks about, possibly closing and whatnot? Did you know things, or was it more so the opportunity, at Stout where again, your alma mater, you obviously invested a lot there and love that place? Like, was it more so just kind of that was the opening, it was the time to go, or did you see things at Mount Scenario kind of slipping there from a school standpoint?
Well, obviously, I knew everybody at Stout. I was coaching overseas. I was coaching in the Middle East for 2 different stints, which is a whole 'nother story in itself considering what's happening now.
Yeah.
But I was coaching in the Middle East, and when Stout opened up, I got a lot of phone calls, I mean, a lot of phone calls from Stout to come and interview, and "We need you here," and all that kinda stuff. And so, as far as Mount Scenario goes, there always were financially, it was always tough because it was such a small school. So I would say no, it wasn't like I saw it was closing. It was time to move on. After 11 years, 3 national championships, it was time to do something a little bit higher level and try to bring some glory back to UW-Stout that Coach Mintz had put into that program. And so that's why I went back, and my wife, Connie, was really happy about that. She wanted to go to Menominee, and so then we went back to Stout and started that process all over again. But the interesting part is a lot of the things that worked in Mount Senario didn't necessarily work at Stout because it was tough to get foreign players into the school because you don't have any kind of financial assistance. They don't even have financial aid as foreign players, and so that didn't work out real well from that standpoint. And then, the rules are a little bit different, a little tougher. And so it got to, I had to learn on the fly again because of the different situation that UW Stout brought to the table.
Absolutely. Going back to Stout, and again, we kind of touched on it a little bit, or I mentioned it with, the unique majors, and you were touching on that as well too. Which, Stout, I played a lot of AAU basketball when I was in high school, and we didn't, leave the state, but that's when Stout, always had the tournaments over there. It was like Menominee was the place to be for AAU basketball, and always loved the town and just and how it seemed like the town embraced the college and vice versa. Kind of going back there, what do you remember getting back there? And again, obviously, I'm sure you ran across them and probably played them when you're at Mount Senario and whatnot. But what do you remember getting back there and being different from those WSUC days? Like you said, the talent there was unbelievable, and nowadays it's not even comparable. But what do you remember getting back there, and what things were similar, and what things were like, oh, this is different because I've been gone a while.
Well, I do know that the first 6 years we were there, we brought in a lot of talent, because I had a lot of connections around the world and around the country of coaches that would call me and say, "I've got this player, 6'9", 255, and, he just needs someone to take him under his wing and get his academics squared away, etcetera." So we did a lot of that. We had a lot of success early at UW Stout. But also you're going up to a higher level now where the coaches are really good and the programs are really good. So every night's a battle. And I remember the first year, uh, I, I I brought two players with me from Mount Senario to play with me at UW Stout. And I remember the first year we had a lot of close games, and we finished eighth out of 9 teams in the league. But I mean, we had a ton of close games. And so we go down to Whitewater for the WIAC tournament, the first game of the WIAC tournament, and we rocked Whitewater 90-49. And I'll tell you, it was so funny coming back from the game because I'm talking on the phone to all my friends, and they said, "Well, how'd the game go?" I said, "Well," I said it was 90-49, and they right away said, "Wow, you guys got spanked." I said, "Well, it was a tough game." Longer. Then they said, "Well, what's going on now?" I said, "We got practice tomorrow." And they go, "What do you mean?" I said, "We won 90-49." So, I mean, it'll that score will last the test of time in terms of biggest spread, in the WIAC tournament. But anyways,
That's
uh,
crazy.
and so and that was Augie, Dave Vandermeulen, and that was Augie's last year.
Okay.
So that was his last game.
Wow.
And so I sent Augie on his way, and he's such a good friend. And then I beat Kenny in Eau Claire, Kenny Anderson, his last year, so sent him on his way, and he's a really good friend. So the thing is that we all have our stories, but I'll tell you the biggest when you won a game in the WIC, you, really cherished it because they were tough to get.
Yeah, 100%. I remember that 05-06 season that you had, which was really special. You guys go to the NCAA tournament, I believe that year, beat Carleton, if I'm not mistaken. I think you end up losing a close game to Augustana, but just the talent you had on the team. I was playing at the time, but obviously a big college hoops junkie at that point, just following the state and Ryan Stengel and Nonamaker twins and Terry Farmer and just that group you had. I mean, was just so special. And you obviously you had a few years like that at Stout. In terms of the recruiting battles and things like that, did you ever think that from Stout's standpoint with having more unique majors, and obviously every UW's got them, right? I mean, River Falls is into egg stuff, and you got the DNR kind of things at Stevens Point. Everyone's got kind of their own specific flavor, but there's a lot of majors that are very similar in terms of offerings of business and different stuff, communication, what may not be at those different schools. Did you ever think at Stout you had an advantage with things being more unique, or did that make that more challenging because it was more specific in a certain area?
I think it really, made it more challenging because if we had your major, there's a good chance we got you. But the thing is, because we were so limited in majors, there's obviously a very good there's a good chance that we didn't have your major, and therefore you're not coming. So I think it was a little bit of a disadvantage, but life is what it is. And the thing is that you gotta you can't sit around and complain about what you don't have. You got to recognize what you do have and take it from there. And I really enjoyed my time at UW-Stout. I still have a lot of friends there. There's a lot of friends during the time I was there. Our gym was packed a lot. People were really excited about our program, and it was really nice. Nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Johnson Fieldhouse is one of those. I mean, as a player, with the floor baskets and just the way it was set up, I felt like it was such a great gym and almost had a great atmosphere. Again, if you had 800 people in there, if you had a couple thousand in there, it was just always a really fun place to be at and play. 2012-13, you had another 20 plus win season. You get towards the 2017-18 season, which ends up being your final year there. Like I said, we faced you guys early in the year in that tournament. Did you know that that was gonna be your last year, as you were kind of finishing up at Stout, or was that kind of a mutual decision with you and Stout there to just kind of be done at that point?
Well, I suspected we'd had a couple bad years prior to that, and we had some of our recruits had fallen through. And because I always tell people when it comes to coaching, I don't know about you, Marcus, but when I have really good kids, I'm a heck of a coach. If I don't have good kids, I'm not very good. And so the thing is that I told that to Jerry Pettigrew one time, and we laughed about it because it is so true. You gotta have some quality players, and then if you then once you have the quality players, you can put it through, and really get them going. You're going to be very successful. And so we'd had a couple bad years, and I knew that the school was, I'm sure they were getting a lot of complaints about the program and not winning enough, and so, I mean, it made it a little tougher.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your perspective too, like you said, like not looking back, and hindsight's 2020, and which is true, right? Like you can sit and look back at a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And we all make decisions for a reason when things happen, right? And I think everybody kind of goes through that stuff. When it was all said and done for you, I mean, how was kind of that feeling for you being done there? I mean, obviously you had invested a lot to that institution over many years between being a student and an assistant and a head coach. How long did it kind of take you to get over that, or was it just kind of one of those things where you're like, hey, I've given everything here and I'm at peace. Like it is what it is.
I've always been the glass is half full guy. I had one more year in my contract, so I was the golf coach for 1 year after that, and then I retired from coaching and from teaching. But again, obviously, you don't wanna be let go. You don't wanna lose your job. But I heard a million years ago, NBA coaches were always talking they always had a saying, "It's not about if you get fired, it's when." And so the thing is that even at the college level, even at the high school level, uh, that's really, true to form. In other words, there are some coaches that just leave because they want to, but if you stick around long enough, there's a good chance you're gonna be let go. If you're it's really hard to maintain that high level of success, and then you don't have to worry about it, and there are coaches that have done that. But anyway, no, I really appreciated what Stout had given me. I had given all I had. I raised $1.4 million in the 11 years or the 18 years I was there. And, our venue at UW Stout when I came in the first couple years, we turned it into the best venue in the WIAC. We had the projection screens with the game on and the highlights. So we had the pregame videotapes that showed our team dunking and all that music flashing. We had the spotlights. We had the bleachers on the end, so we wrapped it up nice. It wasn't just a field house, it was all blocked in. I mean, we put in a brand new floating floor. We did a lot of really good things, and that took a lot of my attention during the 18 years I was there, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being part of the solution, not part of the problem.
And that's where maybe I played. in a tournament there when I was in college. We didn't face you guys. It was your tournament again. I think we faced Augustana and St. Scholastica. But, and that might have been in that 05-06 season, actually, now that I think about it, that really good year you guys had. But I think that's maybe part of it too, why I enjoyed it so much because you had all that stuff, which at the time I feel like was very ahead of its time, right? Nobody else had the projection screens and the different stuff that just making it a what felt like a Division 1 environment, even though it was Division 3. It felt a lot bigger than what it probably was, but it was awesome. And so I greatly appreciate that too as a player. And obviously you had a lot of success. I mean, WBCA Hall of Famer, you were just talking, which we can talk on, coaching the Qatar national team. The run and jump press. I mean, I didn't actually mention you about that. Like, where did you come up with the run and jump press? Because I think there's so many things that when people, talk about Coach Andrus, that always comes up about Coach Andrus run and jump press. Is that something that goes way back to when you first got into it with, at UW-Stout, or is that just something that you came up with over time?
I came up with it over time. Obviously, it's out there. I studied it. Rick Pitino obviously is a big run and jumper, and probably the one of the first guys was the old North Carolina coach.
Dean
I can't
Smith?
remember Dean Smith. He was a big run and jumper. But what I did was I took all the stuff that I had studied, and then I said, okay, how can I adapt this to how I want to teach it and what I think will work at our level? And we've had a lot of success with it over the years. I've introduced it to a lot of high school teams around the country. And, I think I was looking the other day, I think I've got 20 state championship, high school championships from teams that are using it. And so the thing is that I've always been that guy, always been the guy that wanted to take it to you. I wanted to take coaching out of the game because when you run and jump, it's really difficult to find something that works against it. And then obviously as I've developed it over the last 50 years, what happened is that teams would find something that they could do that was a little wrinkle that might hurt it a little bit, and then I had to find a way to stop that wrinkle, and that only made me better. Better at teaching it, better at running it, and so there's no doubt that I am the run and jump guy. And I'll tell you right now, I had a coach from Wisconsin that just contacted me the other day. I get emails quite a bit during the year, and a coach contacted me, wanted me to come and run a camp in Wisconsin. And I told him, I said, "You're on the right track, coach. You're on the right track as far as taking your program to that next level. Because if you really stick to it and go after it and understand the little nuances of it, how to teach it, how to adjust it, and how to play it, all of a sudden you've got a very happy team because you're playing a few more kids. The parents are happy, and you're developing toughness in your program, you're developing depth in your program, and all of a sudden you're having a lot more fun. And yeah, I'm not saying you're going to win every game, but the bottom line is you're going to put yourself in a position to win, and that's what you're looking for.
You hit it right on the head, especially in today's environment, right? I mean, you talk about kids and participation and parents and just the overall feel good. And again, the more kids you can get in, and again, from a number standpoint, right? Just keeping kids engaged all the way from when they're in late grade school to a high school team. If you can keep participation up, I mean, that's going to give you a better chance to win games. And I think you said 20 some teams had won state titles and whatnot using that. How does that feel? I mean, giving back and being like, okay, I didn't coach this team, but I definitely had a piece in this. Like, how does that make you feel?
Over the years, when coaches contact me and they tell me what's happened, how they've won, how the press looks, or they get a hold of me and they say things like, "Coach, can I pick your brain a little bit more because this team is doing things against us that I'm a little concerned about." And like I just walked talked to a Michigan coach they start their playoffs tonight. And so, there's always questions and always appreciation, and you're right, there's no doubt, anybody who says it's not true, it's absolutely true. Giving back to this profession. I have been all over the world. I've coached in the Middle East. I have had trips to Hawaii and Florida and Yugoslavia, and I mean, how could I not have that attitude of giving back to all these teams and all these coaches, players? It's so nice. It really is part of the process.
it probably would be easier to count the places you haven't been than the places you have been, right? I mean, which is awesome. And how, nowadays being out of it, but obviously still conversing with coaches on the run and jump. I mean, is there ways you stay connected outside of that? Like, do you keep a pulse on the D3 game? Do you watch Division 1 games? Like, what's kind of your state with the basketball realm? Obviously, you talk to high school coaches as you just mentioned, but any way else you stay connected, or are you kind of like, hey, I do my talk with them on this, and I'm kind of good with that. I've done my time in terms of watching the games and keeping up with it.
The teams that are running the run and jump, I am on their huddle. So when they have a game and then they email me and say, "Coach, could you take a quick look at our game from last night?" Then I'll watch maybe 10, 15 minutes of that game, and I will email them back some ideas. Because I always tell them that I'm not telling you what to do, because if I taught 100 schools the run and jump press, and you went and watched all those 100 schools on the run and jump press, you would see 100 different variations of the run and jump press, because that's what coaching is. It's about making things fit what your eye sees and your
Sure.
vision. And so when I see somebody, I always tell the coaches, I'll give you some ideas and I'll tell you what I see, but it doesn't mean that that's what you should do.
Yeah.
It just means that now you have some options. But I really enjoy that. I enjoy staying in touch. I'm on the phone a lot during the week, talking to coaches and talking to friends of mine that are coaching, and it is a lot of fun. And I obviously watch the Badgers religiously. My wife and I are really into the Wisconsin Badgers, and, so we watch them. We get them out here in Arizona, and then, March Madness, which is right around the corner. You can put me in front of a big screen TV, throw me some pizza, and don't talk.
That sounds like everyone. I love that right there. That should be on a t-shirt. Throw me in front of a big screen, give me some pizza, don't talk to me. I love that. Well, Coach Andrus, I mean, I appreciate you taking some time and jumping on here and sharing your story and everything in the profession that you've done. I mean, that's honestly awesome that you're still giving back to this day, in terms of all the time that you put into it, and still giving back to high school coaches or whoever's running the run and jump, and having some success that way. So that's phenomenal, and great to obviously meet you. Like I said, cross paths with you a few times, never officially met you, but great to have you on the podcast, be able to tell your story.
Marcus, I really appreciate you having me. It's been great.